Good.
Hello, entrepreneurs, and welcome to the Possibility Partners TV show. I'm your host, Ande Lyons, your Chief Possibility Officer, and I help early stage entrepreneurs launch, brand, and build their businesses without spending a fortune or wasting a lot of time. And every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, least almost at 1 p.m. Eastern every Tuesday, you'll find me here on Google Plus Hangouts on Air, sharing Andy-licious advice for entrepreneurial adventurers. And these are conversations with phenomenal, experienced entrepreneurs bringing their best info, tips, tools, techniques to help you and your business stay thriving and humming along. And we love these stories because we learn from every entrepreneur's adventure. And these guests that we have on the show, they're not just sharing their woohoo and clink clink celebration stories, they're also sharing the oh no's and the rut-rows. Those are equally important stories for us to learn from. And so I am so grateful you're here today watching this episode of Possibility Partners, where we're going to be talking about mastering our story and inspiring action. So today's entrepreneurial adventurer, the divinely delicious and oh so talented award-winning media coach, Debra Crosby, is joining us to share her wisdom and provide us with a dose of inspiration and information. Hello, Goddess Debra. Welcome.
Hello, Goddess Andy, and I'm honored and delighted to be here and sharing whatever wisdom that I have with our audience today. Thank you so much
Great.
for having me.
Oh, thank you. We're laughing here. We had some Google Plus challenges before the show started, so big mwahs to the audience who are
Thank
here
you.
live.
Yes, thank you.
Well, Deborah lives in Salem, Massachusetts, so this time of year is very spooky in her neck of the woods, right, Deborah?
It definitely is. I was driving down Derby Street, and there was a pirate and a werewolf and a witch crossing the street all at the same time. Yeah, it's really cool.
And didn't you lead some zombie adventure on Saturday, Deborah?
Well, my commitment to make a difference in the world is through my work as a coach and as a public speaker, but I'm also equally committed to that edict, act locally, think globally, and I produce the Zombie Dance Flash Mob and Zombie Couture fashion show in the month of October to support the Plummer Home for Boys. And the Plummer Home is a gorgeous Victorian home on the ocean, Winter Island, with an acre of land around it, and it houses kids who would otherwise be homeless. So it's a great cause, it's a lot of fun, and yeah, in the month of October I am a zombie wrangler.
Okay, I would love to see a zombie flash dance, Deborah. Will you have a YouTube link that I can post into the archives?
Sure.
Oh, great! That's so wonderful. Well, I'm so glad you're here to help us master our stories, because I know, and from several comments in the audience today, we all have stories, but which story to share and how to share, all of that is can be a little challenging. But before we get started, we also would love to hear about you and your entrepreneurial adventure and how you were called, Deborah, to be an entrepreneur. As I say every week, some are just, they're born that way, and other people, life experiences happen. So what got you started on this great adventure?
I always had a go-getter personality. When I was 10 years old, I came home from school and I told my mother that I was going to go to Africa. And my mom was a single parent and she didn't have a lot of resources, so I expected her to say no. And she was washing dishes in the sink and she turned to me and she said, "Okay," more like, "Go away." And I took okay meaning yes, and so I was on a mission to get to Africa. So in sixth grade, when I was 12 years old, I was the president of the French club, and we had a trip planned. And this was a poor community, and we didn't have a lot of resources, but I had it in my mind to get to Paris, and secretly at night I was going to take a rowboat over to Morocco and just row back in the morning, and nobody would know. That was my plan. And so I suggested Paris to the French club, and the teacher, Miss Julia, said, that's a wonderful idea, Debra. I'd also like to suggest that we go to Montreal. We'll have to sell a lot of candy bars to get to Paris. And I had in my mind we're going to go to Paris, so I ordered 10 cases of chocolate bars. Each case had 10 boxes, and each box had 10 candy bars. You do the math. And so that was the day we didn't have cell phones, so after school I had my 10 cases of candy bars. I called my mother up and I said, Mom, I have to go to Paris and I have to sell candy bars to get there. And my mother's a good sport. My mom was a kindergarten teacher, and she had taught everybody in this town. And so we went to every single one of her previous students. I knocked on the door, rang the doorbell, and I said, I'm trying to get to Paris, and will you buy a candy bar from me? Well, like, they bought a case. You know, people were like, are you kidding? This kid wants to go to Paris from this poor community? Of course. So I sold out all the candy bars, and I handed Miss Julia the wad of cash on Friday because I sold all the boxes.
Right.
And I'm ready to go to Paris because secretly I get to Africa. And she was really pleased that I had raised so much money, but it was no one. We weren't getting to Paris. And she said, I just want to announce that we have decided that we are going to go to Montreal. And I want to say a special thanks to Debra, because she raised enough money not only to pay for her trip, but to help 3 other individuals who otherwise wouldn't be able to go.
Oh my God.
And so this on the surface may seem like a disappointing story to a kid, but I was so elated that I was helping people. I was excited that we were getting to Montreal. Secretly, I was still trying to figure out how to get from Montreal to Africa. Yeah.
I love that story. Talk about having gumption. Oh my gosh, what movie is Gumption from? But anyway, that's a wonderful story, and obviously you were there ready to go around and ask and to help, and the beginning of your entrepreneurial adventure started. But you went into acting. What compelled you to go into acting, Debra?
It was my grandmother, my great-grandmother's fault. I blame them. That my grandmother used to, Evelyn, Grammy Evie, I love her. I feel like she's with me right now. Used to tell stories to church ladies on Sundays after church, and I thought everybody's grandmother did that. And I had a great-grandmother, interestingly enough, on my paternal side, who used to tell stories to me all the time. So this is the culture I grew up in, and this was normal for me.
Wow, that's amazing. And then, so you got educated in acting, and you went off and pursued things. What was the first real, when did you know that you were unemployable? That's what I always like to say. When did you know that you were ready to run your own show?
I was 22 years old, and I was knocking on that door when I had come back from England, still trying to get to Africa, and we'll get to that in a second. I was 22 years old, had just come back from England, and I applied for an office gopher job, which required typing 60 words a minute. I could do everything, you know, lick stamps, send postcards, photocopy, get coffee, but I couldn't type at all if someone really put a gun to my head. And I said, listen, if you invest in me and you have me hire me for this position, it was $15 an hour back in the day, it was a lot of money. I said, we will receive 100% return on your investment. And I said, I can start on Monday. Well, I can come in at 10. And the guy said, well, we really should Ed Payshot, my then boss, he said, we really should interview other folks. I said, you really don't want to waste your time interviewing other people? And I sound cocky now. I think about it myself now, and I go, oh my gosh, what was I saying? Where did I get this gumption? And he said he never interviewed anyone with that much enthusiasm. So they hired me as an office gopher that Monday. A couple weeks later, the entire office team was out, and I answered the phone. It was a training company called Technologies for Creating. And over the phone, I enrolled someone for a $450 course.
Wow.
And no, I didn't feel like I was selling at all. I listened to what they were looking for. I listened to what their goals were. I listened to what they needed. And based on that, I said, I highly recommend that you take this advanced course. And I said, we want to secure your place because it's a very popular course. Let me register you now. And everyone came back. I had the credit card form filled out, the registration form out, and I said, did I do this right? I had a blast. Can I do more of that? So I ended up being catapulted from office gopher to regional director of sales for all of New England for this training company at 22. I didn't know what I was doing, but that entrepreneurial spirit where I absolutely unequivocally wanted to be of service. I really believed in the product and the training that this company offered. It really made a huge difference in people's lives, mine and everybody who I saw go through the program. So I was a real enthusiastic advocate for what this program could do, and I never felt I was selling. I never felt like I was being manipulated. It was always an open invitation without obligation to change your life.
Wow.
And that was a monstrous catalyst for me, and I worked for the company for a year, and then I was ready to go off on my own and start my own company.
Congratulations. I mean, you clearly embody the word possibility, because you are always looking for possibility, whether it's in a conversation with a potential buyer, customer, or anything. I mean, getting to Africa, whatever. It's a wonderful trait to have. And entrepreneurs, you can see from Debra's own experience, working for someone, getting some great nuggets, great pieces of information about herself, uncovering some core genius that she had, as well as some important insights. It really catapulted her into where she needed to go and how she needed to get there. I love that, Debra. So when did you start becoming the goddess here in Boston area of actor, studio, and TV Quest, etc.?
Well, going back to the first story that I told, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Going back to the first story I told is having this vision, and the vision will catapult you forward. So in 2004, I was working with a business coach, and I actually had put it down for my 5-year business plan that by 2009 I would have my own studio. And the studio actually happened in 9 months after I wrote it down.
Wow.
And I had, at that point, a ton of experience, a ton of training, a ton of credentials, and a variety of tools and techniques from a variety of mediums, not just acting. And I was ready to open my studio. I opened it in 2005. And I haven't looked back since. I am definitely not employable.
And you've done some really intense occupations as an entrepreneur. Tell the story about how you decided to do the whole talent quest and how it grew from just a little studio in Salem into Boston, because I think this is a great how things can open up and start exploding and sometimes get a little out of control.
I wanted to provide a platform, a venue for my acting students to showcase their talent, but I didn't want to do a theater production. A theater production usually requires 7 days a week, rehearsals at night up until 11 or midnight, sometimes 1 o'clock in the morning, and so that I knew that wasn't going to work. So I thought it would be fun to start a television show. And actually the concept for the television show happened when I did go to Africa. I went to Africa a couple of years after opening my studio, and on the way back from Africa, doing humanitarian work in Africa, because I finally got there, the woman sitting next to me said, "You have such a big personality, Debra, and you love helping people. Why don't you start your own television show? You know, like you know that guy, Dave Maynard, he had a TV show called Community Auditions on Sundays. You should do something like that." I thought, cracking up laughing, and she said, "What's so funny?" I said, "That's my dad."
And for those of you who grew up in Boston, come on, how often do I start singing Star of the Day, who will it be? I mean, come on, that is Dave Maynard, a Boston local beloved person, and the community auditions were so great, Debra. I mean, we all have so many fond memories of those.
So I said that would be fun, and interestingly enough, my brother, a month prior to going to Africa, I was talking to him on the phone. I was talking about all the successes of my students, you know, landing Hollywood roles, commercials, TV, films, and even on Broadway, lead roles, not just background. And he said, "What about you, Debra? How come you're not on TV?" And I was like, "Oh, right." So I kind of felt like the universe was kicking me in the butt, and I said, "Okay, sign me up." So I thought it would be fun to start a television show, and it was a riot. It was absolute crazy riot. We started out in a little local cable access TV station, and many towns in America have them, and this is the size of a postage stamp. And I had mostly my students coming on board, because it was volunteer at the time, to do crew, and I had everybody trained. And before long, we were attracting so many contestants and so many audience members that we had to go live and have a feed go into local restaurants and homes, because there was a line out the door to watch the show.
Oh, wow.
But it was a crazy adventure. And my favorite moment, and there are many, and in terms of it's not always perfect. You know, my dad said, "Shoot for the stars, you might get to the moon."
Right.
So we were a bunch of volunteers who were trained at first from the local cable access station, and it was my birthday, and they decided they were going to surprise me for my birthday on the show. And so I have one of the crew members coming in with the cake. The audience is singing "Happy Birthday," and the camera operator, who was the co-producer, ran to get the cake, but didn't lock down her camera. This is when we're live, and the camera is going straight to the ceiling. And so the home audience is hearing "Happy Birthday," but looking at the ceiling. Do you know how many phone calls came in?
Hey, you know, it doesn't just happen on Google Plus Hangouts on air, folks. These things can happen on live TV, because at that point, weren't you broadcasting from Hard Rock Cafe?
Oh, that was when we were local cable access station, and again, the goal was to become broadcast television. That was the vision, and we ended up producing the show at the Hard Rock Cafe in Boston, very cool venue. I think it was our second show. We actually had someone in the audience watching the quality of the production, and they said, "This has to be on television." I'm like, "Yeah, we want this on broadcast television too." And he said, "Well, I'm a producer." I'm like, "Great, so what do we do?" Sign me up. So that was another adventure, and it was a quantum leap going from local cable access station to broadcast television. The standard is really high. I started to have to hire crew members, not just volunteer members, and the standards of everybody wants everything yesterday. The pace was incredibly intense. It was very rewarding, very fulfilling, extremely challenging in terms of running my studio and producing a television show at the same time and hosting.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a lot to take on, and what I really appreciate about Debra is that at a certain point she realized she didn't need to have that as her life, that there were other ways that she could feel fulfilled and still share her gifts with the world and not have such an intense 24/7 job. Because anybody who was thinking, "Oh, I'd love to be a TV show host or produce a show," it is so time intensive, right, Debra?
And that's one of the things that most people in the television industry don't realize, how life-consuming it can be. It's not something that people talk about, but if you look at Oprah's producers, they pretty much, that's all they do. They work 70, 80, 100 hours a week. They love it. They're well compensated for it, but they pretty much don't have anything else going on. You do have to realize that's what you're signing up for.
Right.
And, for the right personality and someone who has a very loving, supportive, and understanding family, it's awesome. If you're not prepared for the intensity of what is expected in the industry, can be exhausting.
Right, and I'm always saying to entrepreneurs, it's a Don Purdom quote, and other people quote as well, but it's really build your life around your business. You can do it, and the things that are important in life sometimes fly by and we miss them because we're so focused on our business and not on our life. Folks, this is Ande Lyons. The Hangout toolbox is not working today, so you can always find me at andelyons.com. I'm your host, and today I have such an extraordinary guest who's clearly lived an extraordinary entrepreneurial adventure of huge proportions, and it's Debra Crosby. And we're just getting the best and delicious advice for entrepreneurial adventures today. I'm so grateful to have her on the show here, and I want to remind the live viewers, you can join us in the room after the show. It's called the Afterglow Party, and I'll put the link to the room here after I hit end broadcast, and come on in. Debra and I would love, love, love to see you. One thing I'd like to do right now, Debra, is just say hello to a lot of the people who are watching live who are so patient today. We had David Pipe, we had Richard O, and Esther, and we had Sally, and Sean just arrived, so he missed all the real excitement of the pre-show. And then we had, I'm just going to scroll down and say hello to Nicole. Hi, Nicole, and Deborah Oakland, and Lainey, and just so many wonderful people. Thank you for being here and watching the show live with us today. We're going to now dive into the heart of our topic, which is regarding mastering our story and inspiring action. We really want to pick your brain today, Debra, and find out how do we best do that.
So the first piece of advice that I would give people is, in business in general, if you need help, get it. Just find somebody who's an expert or coach, someone who can guide you on the path. No matter what your challenge is, get help for it, and get help for it right away.
Right.
That's my first advice. My dad said, know your subject and know your audience. If you're a business owner or some kind of an expert, a coach, you obviously know your subject area. What happens for most people, they get so excited and they're so enthusiastic that they don't realize that they need to deliver less is more. And knowing your audience is knowing exactly what they need to hear.
Right.
So, for example, I frequently working with entrepreneurs as a trainer, and they tell their audience in their elevator pitch every single product, every single service, everything that they do, and it's information overwhelm. Okay, you know who's in your audience, and you have to think about what is it that I do that can actually be specifically helpful for the people here in this moment right now. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of credentials and training, but if I told people all of the things that I have credentials in, they would be like, really?
How did that happen?
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the first challenges is perhaps just, which story to choose, and if you're like me, it's so many stories, so little time, right? How to nail down that particular story. And in fact, Esther here says, I have many stories to tell, but my challenge is how to tell my story and also keep some privacy for my son, who is at the center of my story. Esther, that's a really, really great comment and question. What do you think about that, Debra?
So what I would do is I would not make it so personal and start thinking about it in third-person perspective. That's one technique. So you actually change the child's name. And the other technique is actually turn it into a folk tale or a fairy tale. Look at the elements of the story, the beginning, middle, and end. Where is the problem and where is the problem being solved? If it's a real story, there usually is a hero's journey where the main character, and let's say it's your son, has an experience, and as a result of that experience changes or learns or becomes a better person. That's a great story, and if you can start thinking about that story more like a folk tale or fairy tale, if it has a universal truth at the end, you'll be fine, and you can protect his innocence and you can protect his identity. If you have more specific questions about that, I'd be happy to hear what you have to say, but without knowing the specifics of the story, that's my best advice I can give you. I've worked with a lot of public speakers who want to do the same thing, and that's the way we've worked at.
That's awesome, Debra. And speaking of fabricating stories and embellishing on real life stories, Sally Sue Ember says, I tell mine and everyone else's story in my circles by starting with the truth and then elaborating, fabricating creatively. Lines between fact and fiction are deliberately blurred to the degree that I had people in my family and among my close friends calling and emailing me to ask if they really happened. So that can be, certainly entertaining, right, Debra?
It can be entertaining, and that is the craft of a storyteller. A great storyteller is always spinning the yarns, and the beautiful thing is if you're exaggerating the truth, eventually it becomes obvious that it is an exaggeration, and your audience is going to know, and it's then entertaining and amusing and fun. Right. So the more you exaggerate, actually you heighten what's called a comedy. And there's also a principle from improv where you make the improbable seem probable. And so it sounds like she has a natural way of doing this. And again, I work with people to do that not by mistake, but consciously through craft and tools and technique.
Wonderful. I love that. Now, how does one find a voice for their story so that we don't start sounding like Charlie Brown's teacher? You remember, wah, 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 wah. I always remember her from the cartoons. How do we find our voice?
So there's two ways I understand your voice. One is we're talking about technique. So we're talking about taking care of your vocal cords. So the first and most important thing is to remember to breathe. And most people, when they're speaking in public first, they're so excited, their adrenaline is rushing, they don't always remember to breathe. So what you want to be thinking about is you want to be inhaling and taking enough oxygen into your lung capacity and thinking about your lungs like a swimming pool, and you want to fill that swimming pool up almost to the top. And then you want to let the air out almost completely. And the other thing is you want to make sure you're taking in your next breath before you actually run out of air. Because if you keep talking, and I'm going to role model right now, I'm going to keep talking and I'm not going to take in a breath in a second, and you're going to hear what's called a glottal fry. Can you hear the little scratchiness in my voice? That's because I didn't take a breath in soon enough. And the glottal fry is something that you think about your vocal cords like bacon. Your vocal cords are heating up so much that they're actually frying, and then it can cause some damage. So you want to make sure you're breathing, and breathing often.
Yeah, is that something that you can train someone to do so they do it automatically? I do. When I do my weekly Ande Lyons Minute, I have the same problem. I'm like, oh my gosh, where do I breathe? I don't have Blake Shelton to tell me when to breathe. Do you coach folks so that it comes naturally when to breathe?
I do it before I start any training with anyone. I have a breathing technique, and I actually can send an MP3 download where people can actually listen to this breathing technique. It's only a couple minutes long, and when you practice it, it takes 1 minute to do. And then you can do that anywhere, anytime, and as it becomes a practice, it becomes more of a lifestyle.
Wow. And is there a typical length to a story, or is it, again, who's your audience, what's the venue, et cetera? What's the speech length?
It depends on your audience. Obviously, depends on your venue. If it's your family and friends and you're around the campfire, you can go on and on.
It's great. And
if you're doing a TED Talk, you have minutes and it has to be tight, and it has to be concise, and it has to be absolutely unequivocally within the minutes that you've been allotted as a TED Talk presenter.
Do you prepare folks to be TED Talk presenters?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, you do. Okay, everybody, you heard it here. I mean, they have very strict guidelines, don't they, Debra?
It's a Bible. It is a Bible, and I love working with an expert who it knows they are a thought leader, because for me, I know part of my calling, part of my life purpose, why I'm here on the planet is to have a positive impact on the world. So exponentially, if I am working with someone who's a TED Talk presenter, I know for a fact that the numbers of people I'm having an impact on, it just expounds and spouns and becomes larger and larger. So I love working with folks who have those kind of goals.
Wow, I love that. Now, as far as setting the story up, how do we avoid too much preamble? How do we engage the audience? I mean, there's a lot to this whole storytelling, right?
Well, it's good to work with a coach to help you, because you can't figure all that out on your own. You want to make sure there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And in the middle is where your crisis or your problem occurs. Everything is around what happens before that problem or after that problem, the resolution of the problem or the solution to the problem, where someone has changed as a result of what they've learned because of how they've engaged in the problem. That is a story. Whatever details you decide to put in your story, you always have to think about, are these elements helping me move the story forward, or am I just madly in love with this detail and I can't help but put it in? And you have to be able to get to a point where you look at your story objectively, and you have to think about yourself as the messenger or the instrument of the story, and to be of service to the story, and most importantly to be of service to your audience. So you have to be like a scientist in a sense and really scrutinize the elements of your story. And imagery is super important as well. Vivid imagery is important, but making sure your language is always moving the story forward to a completion.
Right. I mean, sometimes you know that the person speaking and telling the story is actually writing. It's not the same as spoken words, right?
No, the written word and the spoken word are two different mediums. How a story sounds and feels. The feeling underneath a story, people really get, that's how they get the message of the story, is being connected authentically in your heart while you're telling a story. It requires a certain vulnerability in authenticity and being connected to why you are telling this story.
Right. I mean, it's the best investment, folks, that you could ever make in your career, I believe, and in your business, is working with a coach who really helps you hone your message, how you present it, making sure it's, I mean, I saw a speaker yesterday, all the time. It kind of drove me nuts. And so you don't want that, and a coach will make sure that you don't do that, because a lot of times in our telling, we have some unconscious mannerisms that just do not work. Right, Debra?
I have some advice on the
Oh, good. We have advice.
I have advice. So most of us, in this culture anyway, want to fill in the blank or fill in the empty space with something. And it's just a knee-jerk reaction because we're uncomfortable with the emptiness. And if you can bring consciousness and awareness to that knee-jerk reaction and catch it before the impulse of filling that space with a or but or you'll start training your brain to work differently. And it also invites a more like a beautiful connection with people, because it forces you to be in the moment with your material and with your audience, because you're being conscious about what you're saying.
Nice. I love that. That's a great piece of advice for all of us. I love that. Thank you. So we've mastered our story. We've got our presentation down. How does this inspire action, Debra?
So if your story has a universal truth, in other words, there is some kind of life lesson, and people can relate and connect to that, that will be where it can become you're a thought leader, and you're providing people the opportunity to change their consciousness and think about themselves and how they relate to the world in a different way. So if you're telling a great story, it should do that. So at the end of a great story, it should inspire some kind of action. And the kind of action could be an internal state of mind where someone starts to think about themselves in a different way, or think about their relationships in a different way, or think about who they are in the world or where they are in the world. And what I mean by that is, we are in America, but I've traveled extensively and I have lived with indigenous tribes. There is not just one worldview called the American worldview. I'm deeply grateful that I'm American and we have the freedoms that we have here, but there's not just one way of thinking. And so it does open you up to think about yourself in the world in a new way. So a call to action, some kind of action, means either thinking about yourself or the world, or there's some kind of cause. So one of my clients is a penguin expert, and so when she gives her TED Talk, she doesn't tell people, oh, make a donation to this penguin foundation, but as a result of listening to her talk about the penguins and the passion that she puts into, and the knowledge and the wisdom and the expert advice, and it's amazing, her talk is amazing, people feel, wow, I really want to help penguins, and so they just do it.
Right.
Also, if you're an expert or a coach, as a result of your talk, the call to action is someone who would want to be working with you as a coach, because that's why they came to see you in the first place. So a great talk should organically and naturally inspire action.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. I'm going to just bring up a few more comments from the crowd today. Richard O., live production can be such an adventure. Yes, it can. Thank you for that, Richard O. And then Sean Mann over there in the UK, great points about specific stories and targeted elevator pitches that are particularly relevant to the audience, client base being spoken to. Brilliant stuff. Thanks, Sean, for that. And Robin, TED speakers are a multiplier for you, Debra Crosby. I love that. That's a great insight, Robin. She's absolutely right. Speaking of multiplier, our wonderful guest today, Debra Crosby, is launching a new business that I, for one, am so excited about. Tell everybody about your new adventure.
Well, I'm considering this, Andy, the pre-launch baby shower for Present to Prosper. And Present to Prosper, I will be helping entrepreneurs, experts, coaches, and authors, those are my ideal client, how to master their story, captivate their audience, inspire action, and attract clients. It's a whole entire business model. And I would love to be working with more TED Talks presenters and more people who have the goal to be a TED Talk presenter. And that's what I do, and I've been doing it for decades.
I think it's great, and I just love the whole evolution of how you are sharing your gifts with the world, Debra. It's been really a remarkable journey, and there's that just lovely little thread of the adventure. And I'm always telling entrepreneurial adventurers that, you know, keep open, stay open, watch as your life evolves, your businesses will evolve, because usually for most of us, once we're an entrepreneur, we can never go back, right? I want to thank those folks right now who swung by and said, hi, Andy, can't wait to watch the show, and hashtag Replay City. And I'd love to take this moment, Debra, and just blow out kisses and wave to everybody on the list. So we have Virginia Parsons, Cherie Valentine, your friend, the Penguin Goddess, Diane DiNapoli. Is that how you say her name, Debra?
DiNapoli.
DiNapoli. Okay, so I really ruined that. Elaine, Tracy Baker, Christopher Pearsall, Susan Winter, Deborah Taylor French, Deborah St. Hilaire, Linda Allen, Gail Harris. I hope I didn't miss anybody, but thank you so much. And of course, thanks to all of you folks who are watching live. I'm so grateful for your comments and your insights. In fact, Deborah O. Oakland, I call her Deborah O, is saying right here, loving your advice, Debra Crosby. I know you're going to be given a TED Talk someday with your Living in Courage platform, Miss Deborah. Any final words for everybody? Share with folks, viewers, how they can work with you, where can they find you, how can they hire you for their TED Talk?
So since Present to Prosper this is the baby shower for Present to Prosper, we're launching that baby soon. I have two other businesses, and one is A Quest Actor Studio, and the other is Conquest Creative Media. And so I can give you the website for Conquest Creative Media. And what I will do, if you contact me and you mention Ande Lyons show, Possibility Partners, I will actually give you an extra discount for being so patient today, and so and for one of my packages. And I usually work with people in a package of 5 hours at a time, and that usually is going to give you a great talk or a great presentation and a great story with a lot of technique coming from the acting world and from the performing arts world. How to work your material, literally from writing your content to performing it, and from either in front of this staged audience or in front of a video camera.
I love it. And remember, live viewers, as soon as I hit end broadcast in about a minute, I'm going to grab the URL from the room, throw it into the comment thread. So I hope you click on it and come on in and ask Debra some questions. We'd love to see you. Thank you for those who have tuned in whenever you have tuned in. I love evergreen content. And thank you for watching this episode of Possibility Partners. I'm so grateful you took the time. Please know that Debra and I are here for any questions, anything you need. You can find us, all the archive, all the contact information is in the archives. Next week, that's November, oh my gosh, 3rd, 4th, oh my gosh, already into November of 2014. Lou Bortone, Mr. Video Marketing Guy, is coming on, and he's going to show you how to have revenue generating videos. Woo! Entrepreneurs love that. Anything with a cha-ching, ka-ching, ka-chang in it, we love, as well as serving the world with our gifts. Thank you for tuning in. Another quick wave to our wonderful guest, Debra Crosby. Thank you, Debra, so much for joining us today. What a treat to hear your story and hear all your great advice.
Thank you very much.
And to all of you entrepreneurs, please know in my heart, I so honor the courage that you're having to walk your truth and your journey as entrepreneurs. I'm here for you, blowing you kisses, and until next time, mwah, stay inspired.